Okay, hello, I'm Michael Renegar. I'm the co-author of Ghosts of the Triad, Tales from the Haunted Heart of the Piedmont with Amy Spease. I'm also the sole author of Roadside Revenants and Other North Carolina Ghosts and Legends, and the brand new Tar Heel Terrors, More North Carolina Ghosts and Legends. I'm going to read to you from Ghosts of the Triad on the Ghosts of Old Salem. Old Salem is one of the oldest settlements in western North Carolina. It was initiated by the German Christian sect called the Moravians, and the first settlers arrived from nearby Bethabara in 1766. It was once a separate town but merged with its neighbor Winston in 1913 to form the new city of Winston-Salem. Today it has been reimagined as a series of living history museums, complete with costume docents and private homes and businesses operated in accordance with rules that maintain the spirit of the old town. There are also said to be other spirits, according to various legends. One of the earliest and most famous of these is the Little Red Man. In life, he was known as Mr. Andreas Kremser. The moniker comes from a very distinctive red coat this well-known man, a cobbler by trade, usually wore. Kremser lived with other single men in the Single Brothers house. One evening in 1786, while working in the basement of the house, digging out to expand the cellar, Kremser was buried alive by shifting earth. Miraculously, the poor man was still alive when the other brothers dug him out. He was mortally wounded, however, and though doctors were summoned, they could do little for the broken man. He lingered into the night, but died in the wee hours of the next morning. The cobbler was laid to rest in God's Acre, the portion of the community cemetery reserved for the members of the Moravian Church. Thus the story of Andreas Kremser ended. Lord did it. From the time of his death until well into the 20th century, Andreas was said to still be around. People heard strange noises, much like a shoemaker's hammer, at all hours of the day. From the corners of their eyes, people would glimpse a short man and with a flash of red, said to be Kremser's well-known red coat. And any unexplained occurrence was attributed to the restless specter that was now called the Little Red Man. The ghost was reported to be playful. Several children reported encounters with an odd little man who would talk to them or play with them. He could also be a bit mischievous. Once two men were discussing the ghost in the cellar of the Single Brothers' house when Andreas suddenly appeared right in front of them. The man tried to grab him, but Kremser vanished immediately. He reappeared across the room, brazenly waving his fingers at them, and with a huge smile disappeared again. Early in the 20th century, a visiting minister was talking with a local clergyman. Inevitably, the subject of Andreas Kremser's active ghost came up. The minister decided that the ghost, though apparently harmless, should be exorcised. With this rite performed, the tenure of Andreas Kremser at Old Salem came to an end. But to this day, any odd noise or strange occurrence is blamed on the Little Red Man. Another legend centers on the ancient Salem Tavern. The original tavern was built in 1771 as one of the first public buildings in town. It was widely known for exceptional hospitality and wonderful food. The first tavern was destroyed by fire in 1784 but was rebuilt within a year. Through the years, many famous and illustrious people patronized Salem Tavern. Scholars, statesmen, generals, many founding fathers. George Washington himself is said to have arrived for a stay in May of 1791. The building was host to many happy travelers over the years, but also saw its share of tragic events. During the Revolution, a soldier named William Brown became ill due to an injury. He was unable to travel, so his unit moved on, leaving him in the care of the operators of the tavern. Brown eventually developed gangrene. The stench became so overwhelming for the guests and workers that the wretched man was moved to the tavern's smokehouse. Brown died in agony in that smokehouse on August the 17th, 1780. Moravian records indicate that the poor man's body had begun to rot and be eaten up with worms while he was still alive. He was buried in a stranger cemetery, which was set aside for those of the community who were not members of the Moravian Church. But for many years his ghost was said to haunt the place where he had died. Disembodied footsteps, loud moaning, and a dark shadow were attributed to the fallen soldier. His ghost was also said to manifest in an overwhelming, foul, and intolerable odor. Salem Tavern's most famous ghost story, however, seems to arise from the death of a tavern guest on September the 6th, 1831. A man named Samuel McClary had traveled to Virginia's Mineral Springs seeking a cure for an undisclosed illness, perhaps smallpox. Whatever the illness, the cure did not succeed. His health failing, McClary began the long journey home. At the end of August or early September, the coach carrying Mr. McClary arrived at Salem Tavern. The man was desperately ill. He stumbled into the tavern and collapsed heavily on the floor. The tavern keeper sent one of his slaves for a doctor and helped another carry the man up to a room. When the doctor arrived, he realized the man was deathly sick. He could do nothing to save McClary, who lapsed into a coma and died before dawn. The man had never spoken, and no one knew his name. The coach driver had left the sick man's things and moved along his route. The keeper searched his belongings, hoping to find something to identify him. He found nothing, however, so the Moravian Church took charge and buried the mysterious traveler in the stranger's cemetery. His belongings were placed in storage. Shortly after the stranger's death, unsettling things began to occur in Salem Tavern. The slaves and employees began to whisper that something was haunting the tavern and its grounds. Unexplained noises, creepy echoing footsteps, and strange moving shadows were noticed by several people. The tavern keeper tried to laugh it off, but the servants continued to be afraid. Finally, one night, one of the female servants burst into his office and shrieked, "Something awful is in the hall!" The keeper was quite annoyed. Leaving the trembling young woman in fear, he walked out into the dimly lit hallway. In the flickering candlelight, he didn't notice anything at first, but then he saw it. The keeper's heart was filled with horror and dread. A shadowy apparition loomed before him. The tavern keeper recognized the clothes as those his guests had been buried in. He almost turned to run back to his office and slammed the door, but something made him stop. The ghost, which had no face, was reaching out to him beseechingly. In a raspy voice it cried, "Help me." The keeper's heart skipped. He stuttered, "Well, what can I do?"
"My name is Samuel McClary,"
the spectral form replied.
"I am begging you, please write to my brother in Texas and tell him I have passed away. My family is terribly worried over my fate."
Touched despite his fear, the keeper promised, "I will do what I can." The ghost thanked him, gave him the address and name, and then vanished before the frightened keeper's eyes. Shaken, the keeper returned to his office, shooed the terrified maid away, and sat down to pen the letter. He posted it the very next day. Several weeks passed with no appearances by the ghostly visitor. Then 2 new strangers appeared in town. They were Samuel McClary's brother and sister. The pair had come to retrieve their brother's belongings and possibly his remains. Though they were given his things, it isn't clear whether the Texan was disinterred and taken home. His purpose achieved, the ghost of Samuel McClary never again disturbed the workers and guests of Salem Tavern. The ghostly legends of Salem Tavern continued, though. Along with the poor soldier, stories have persisted of a ghostly face being seen in the window of an upper floor. This is said to be the specter of one William H. Lutterloh, who suffered from dementia and either fell or leapt to his death from the window. And then there's Augustus Stahl, a German immigrant who arrived in Salem in 1847. He had a fascination with chemistry that would prove fatal. On the night of August the 2nd, 1857, there was a tremendous explosion at Salem Tavern, by that time called Salem Hotel. The smell of volatile chemicals hung in the air. Apparently Stahl, ever the amateur chemist, had mixed the wrong ingredients and BOOM! A member of the Moravian Church, Stahl was laid to rest in God's Acre. The building was heavily damaged. The owner, Adam Butner, sued the dead man's estate and was awarded money for repairs. Staub's ghost is said to haunt the room where he met his untimely end. Salem Tavern no longer serves guests. It is one of many living history museums in the Old Salem complex. But echoes of the past still linger in the old place, and the Salem Tavern Annex next door is alleged to be haunted. It is home to the Salem Tavern Restaurant. Perhaps Brown, Lutterloh, Staub and Company enjoy visiting patrons of that establishment.